Welcome back everyone. Today we're going to be reviewing in detail 3 of the best Challenger Garen 1 tricks out there at the moment. Palco from the NA server, King from Korea, and Stray from the US server. So we're going to be reviewing their lane phase, their mid game, and how exactly they have so much more success than the rest of the Garen players out there. So if that sounds good to you, then let's get it started. Hey everyone, if you're passionate about improving and leveling up your gameplay, I've been offering coaching classes for 5 days a week for quite some time, and just seen firsthand how much my students have been improving across all different elo brackets. How it works is you'll come to a class with a VOD like reviewed, and I'm going to help you with your early game, your mid game, or anything you feel like needs improving. And if you're unsure, then I'm going to steer you in the right direction by setting clear learning objectives. Link's going to be in the description, I hope to see you there, but if not, then enjoy the video. First up, we're going to be covering the runes. Now, the two main rune pages for Garen, the two we have on the screen right now, Conqueror and Phage Rush, is very consistent across all 3 servers. However, there is a big difference in how often each player takes each one. So, for example, King on the Korean server, he takes Conqueror almost every single game. I'd say 99-98% of his games he has Conqueror. He doesn't care if he's up against 5 range champs. And the other two, the NA and the EU Garen, they prefer Phage Rush more often, with the EU Garen taking it in the vast majority of his games. And from my perspective, as somebody that's played on all 3 servers, it does make a lot of sense, where in NA and EU, you can get away with scaling a lot, and Phage Rush page does scale better, but it is a lot weaker early game. Around the Korean server, you need to be doing well in your lane, you need to be participating in a lot of early skirmishes, where if you take Phage Rush and you go even or slightly behind in your matchup, you're not really going to be that relevant until Stridebreaker and Berserker Greaves, which is a very long time into the game, maybe around 14-15 minutes if you don't get a lead. So it's going to take you too long to be useful in that game on the Korean server, where the games are extremely fast-paced compared to EU and NA. So for that reason, and probably he just prefers it. A lot of, league decisions are personal preference, but I'd say that's a big factor of why he prefers Conqueror so often, because he feels too weak and too passive when he doesn't take it. But on NA and EU, you can get away with that 10 CS per minute, really high level, proxy style, and Phase Rush is very good for that, because it's very easy to get to your items unscathed. You're kind of ungankable with it. You can proxy for free, and you do a lot better in this meta, where there's a lot of strong range AP junglers and strong AD carries running around, and a lot of counter picks top are range champions. So it makes sense why they're both taking Phage Rush more often in this meta. A lot of it is personal preference, but I do want to state that in lower elo brackets, Platinum 4 and below, I do recommend Conqueror almost every single time, unless it's just ridiculous, so many range champs, of course, just because Conqueror gives you more 1v9 potential, and especially if you're up against a melee champ, you can gain a lot of solo kills, 1 to 3, by abusing E-Start with Conqueror in those matchups. But if you verse range top jungle, then feel free to take Phage Rush, especially if the matchup's very difficult, and scale up to Stride. A lot of it is personal preference, but I will recommend Conqueror more often if you're in lower ranks, and Phage Rush more often if you're in higher ranks in those really hard, heavy range matchups. And as for some variables, when you would swap out some runes, I do recommend taking Resolve Secondary on the Conqueror page when you're in great bone plating matchups. So if you're up against champs like Jax, that's the most famous one, Conqueror and bone plating, really good in that matchup. Champs like Irelia can do very well. I wouldn't really take Second Win and Overgrowth very often on the Conqueror page, almost never. The only time I'd recommend Second Win is going to be on your Demolish page. So if you're up against champs like Dr. Mundo and Ornn, bone plating is pretty terrible, but Demolish is extremely good. You can start to break tower in front of them, so Demolish with Second Wind would be great in those lanes, but if you're up against a heavy range matchup, I don't recommend taking Second Wind with Overgrowth. Way too passive. You're going to have enough regen with D-Shield and your passive, so you can just take the movement speed runes, Sorcery Secondary, and use that for a lot of kill threat in lane. And as for the shards, you can swap out Flat HP for scaling and matchups where you feel like you don't have a lot of work to do. But if you are taking Conqueror, you're probably going to be playing a little bit aggressive 1 to 3, so flat HP is a little bit better for that. And on the Phage Rush page, you can default to scaling HP more often, unless you're in really hard matchups 1 to 3. And the final variable that you can try out, I have seen Palco on the NA server take Grasp in the Undying into the Tryndamere matchup every single time. That looks like the only one. There are probably a couple more that I haven't seen in his recent games, but he takes Grasp into Tryndamere every single time, so you can also give that a try in that matchup because it can be quite a tough one. Next up, we're going to be covering the item builds, and although all 3 builds may be quite similar, there are some pretty big differences, so we're going to be starting with King on the Korea server. And his favorite build, and this is my preference as well, is the full damage crit build with Stride, PD, Mortal, and IE. This build is going to give you the most carry potential in games where you're snowballing, but it is pretty expensive to get that IE, and when they have a lot of damage on their team, sometimes you will need to build survivability instead. So in that case, you can go Deadmans if you need armor, Force if you need MR, or Sterax in games where you don't really need to resist, but also you don't really need the movement speed that badly. So if you're versing a lot of burst champs that are running towards you, Sterax can be a great item because you don't really need the mobility from the Force or the Deadmans that badly. Now, in games where he's really snowballing, and also if he doesn't need the armor pin or the healing cut that badly, he'll go IE as his third item, which does give you a lot of damage at that point in the game, especially against squishies. But afterwards, you do a lot of damage, but you are quite squishy because you spend so much gold on that IE. So after that, he normally builds survivability like Dead Man's Force or Sterax. Now, some other variables that I've seen him do is he will go Serpent's Fang if they have multiple shielding threats, sometimes even if they have one. And personally, I'm not a fan of this. It's best to make somebody else on your team do that, but it's not always going to be possible, especially if you have double ADC with an AP jungler. You're probably the only one that can build it, so I understand the value. He'll pick that up as his third item into comps like Ivern and chaps like Lulu Janna if he needs the heal cut, especially if they have a Camille top as well. You can get a lot of value from this item. And some other situations, he does go Dead Man's Plate as his second item in games, especially when you verse an 80 carry top. You're probably not going to be able to resum that badly in higher ranks, so I understand the value between Deadmans, especially if they have AD top jungle. It can be a great pickup as your second item. And also Mortal as your second item as well, if you need the healing cut or the armor pin super urgently, or you can even go Zeal into Mortal as well. That can be a great alternative. Now, as for Palco's build, you can see it's very similar, with the main differences being that he prefers Phage Rush for a lot more often, and also he prefers tank items. He's a bit less greedy than Garbon King, so he will go Deadman Sterix or Force as his third item a lot more often, especially in games where he's not that accelerated and he needs some survivability. He'll also go a different type of tier 2 boots depending on the game, where he'll go Steel Caps or played Steel Caps into games where they have an AD top jungle, especially if one of them's an AD carry or a heavy auto attacker like a Tryndamere. He can go Steel Caps. They are quite expensive now, so I'd say that's pretty rare, especially that you can get that on your first recall. But I do see the value, especially if you verse a multiple AD carry comp, which is very common in Challenger right now. And he also goes Swifty boots, and if you ask me about this last patch, I'd be a bit of a fan, because 900 gold compared to 1100 versus a good range top player is achievable, but 1100 is quite difficult to do. But now that Swifties are 1k, the difference is so small that the only time I can see you going Swifties over Berserks is if you are in one of those hard range matchups and you do base on 1k, the Swifties as a spike right there can help you along your lane a lot more than the Boots Dagger or Boots Dagger Sword. If you're a Garen main, you know how bad that feels when you're just off your Berserks and you have to buy little components. Doesn't feel too good, but Swifties, especially if you're in a range matchup, and one with slowing effects as well, can be very valuable. And the last variable, you can see it, Lord Dominic's Regard. He'll build this in games where you need the armor pin, but you don't need the heal cut. Very straightforward. I'd say it's pretty rare that this is better than Mortal, but there are going to be cases for it. And for our last build, we have Stray on the EUS server, and straight away we can see very different build to the previous two. Garen's he is a big fan of the tank build, where he's going to go stride into Dead Man's or Force. You can swap the order of these items depending on how much magic damage or physical damage they have, and then Sterix or Randrins as his last items. And I haven't seen him go Juxtra the Protein, but I imagine it would be quite good as a 4th or 5th item, especially if you already have Dead Man's and Force. And this build gives you a lot of survivability and movement speed. And he does go the crit build sometimes when it's good, of course, especially when he's snowballing, or Stride PD full tank. I've seen him do that as well. And he'll also go Randuins as a 2nd or 3rd item if they have multiple crit chance champs. So Yasuo and a Yone and an 80 carry somewhere, or an 80 carry top with an 80 carry bot. Then he can go Randuins as well. Merc treads into heavy APCC teams, and Steel Cap, same reasoning as before. So if you were to ask me, there's so many builds here, when should I do the tank build? Or when should I do the damage build? And we talked about it a little bit, but the time I'd recommend the full tank build will be in games where your team just needs frontline, but you have enough damage. Especially in this meta and high rank, I do see the value of this build, where if you have, let's say, a brand jungle, some strong AP jungler, 80 carry mid, 80 carry bot, and you just need some frontline, especially if you have an enchanter or a poke support, like a Senna or something like that down bottom, or a Lux, I can see the value. Your team has no frontline, they have enough damage already without you having to build IE, so you can just go full tank and be that frontline and pseudo engage, because if you have Stridebreaker and Dead Man's Force and you're accelerated, you can kind of engage. Garen's not the best engage champion, but if you are tanky enough with your W and this tank build, I can see you getting fights started or making a lot of space for your team, especially if they already have enough damage. So those are the scenarios where I'd see it being best. But I will say again, in Platinum and below, being that solo carry threat, full damage is going to be more often the best thing that you can do, but especially in higher brackets, I'd say high Emerald and above, I do see the tank build in games where when you feel like you can win a team fight and your team has enough damage already. Now, last section before we dive into the gameplay, we're going to be covering summoner spells, and the best setup in the majority of your games is going to be Ignite Flash, and our Korean Garen, Goblin King, he takes that every single game, surprise, surprise, but the NA and the EU Garen, they will take TP in certain matchups, where if they verse a really difficult range champion, like an Aurora or a Vayne, they do take TP and Flash, and they'll also take TP and Ghost in games where it's not just a hard range matchup, but the rest of their comp is range as well. So if you have 4 range champions, or maybe 3 top jungle mid, the Ghost can be very good. Now, I do want to advise, if you are playing below Master Tier, you don't need TP. The range players you're versing, there might be some exceptions. Champs like Aurora, quite difficult right now in High Diamond. There might be some exceptions where you can take TP, but I would say those players are going to be making mistakes that you can capitalize on. It's very, very rare that I've ever seen a matchup below, especially Diamond 4, where it's Garen versus a range champion and the range champion plays so well that the Garen has no options to get a recall. They're going to make a mistake. They're going to get punished by a gank or a good trade by you because they misposition, and you will be able to get yourself a recall at some point. So don't feel like you need to take TP just because in Challenger that they take it, because your opponents are going to be playing worse and the kill threat and carry potential from Ignite is going to be higher for you. Next up, we're going to be covering the laning phase, and we are going to be watching 1 or 2 lanes from each player and breaking it down in detail, and we're going to be starting with Garen King. And I really wanted to do this matchup as our first one because he's playing up against Jayce, a very tricky range matchup, but also there's a very common question I get asked because I recommend my gold and below students to take Conqueror almost every single game. If they have 5 range champions, of course you can take FaZe, but even if you verse a range champ top, the rest of their comp is merely in running into you, or you are going to get value from Conqueror regardless, I do want you to take it either way. And then they'll often ask me, but I'm not going to get value from Conqueror. I can't even really hit my opponent. So we're going to be seeing how Garen King versus a high Grandmaster Challenger Jayce player is able to get value even though he took Conqueror. So we can see takes over this bush level 1, waits for the wave to settle, doesn't want to get aggroed by the creep straight away, and leaves the bush trying to get behind level 1. Something I recommend time and time again. If you watch my content, you probably heard me say this. Get behind your opponent level 1, and something that I really liked, he holds on to his E. A lot of Garens will use their spin right now, but the good Jayce players, not only can this guy space it out with range E, but he is also going to hammer him away. The high rank Jayces into scary melee matchups that'll reach you level 1 will start E instead of Q, which is what this guy does, and he holds onto his E, waiting for the Jayce to be cornered back up against a wall, and then he can get an auto E to maximize his damage. So Jayce knocks him away, but because he was walking behind him, blocking off his escape to tower, he's still able to stick onto him a little bit, and I really like this next play here, where very shortly you'll see he pops his Ignite purely for the Nimbus Cloak. Of course the damage as well in cutting the pot healing, but he pops it for the Nimbus Cloak, gets his second E onto him, and Jayce had to flash. If he didn't flash there, the Garen would have flashed after him, so already off to a great start. Now it doesn't look good, but something you need to keep in mind is ranged champions want to stay high HP and just chip away at you slowly. But if you're playing Garen and you can make it very volatile, both chunk burning the Jayce's flash, it's going to benefit you in the long run because you can just regen that back up with D-Shield second wind, or D-Shield passive, sorry, and he's going to really struggle to survive a gank in this type of matchup where he's a low HP with no flash. So he's just going to regen this back up, he's just going to soak XP, not give Jayce an opportunity to break his passive with auto or Q, and we can see because top was so volatile, the Avengers are kind of rocking up here. Both junglers see, oh, I have to be top. Whoever gets top first is going to be favored for this. And they both move up. Vi was a little bit quicker because she started top side, not bot. But we can see here, the Garen is going to be completely fine. And he manages to play out the skirmish quite nicely. So good gank by Serge. They go on to Jayce here, kite back. Wave is way too big to fight this, but he's going to be fine regardless. Sejuani can cover him. And I'm pretty sure he goes W second level 2, which is really good if you feel like you're going to get dived, exactly like he did in this game. He's a big fan of W level 2 in a lot of matchups, and he's able to outplay this one quite nicely. So ticks 3, auto Q, another kill for him. So really nice, and you may be wondering, what if my jungler doesn't come? Yes, that is going to suck, but keep in mind this Jayce played it extremely well. He got Garen a lot lower than a lot of lower ranked Jayce players would do as well. And you do have room to outplay that dive because the Jayce got lower, the Garen got lower as well, right? Because Garen was taking more damage to do more damage to Jayce, where if you're up against a lower ranked Jayce who makes more mistakes, then you should be able to get an advantage without having to get to literally 1 HP yourself. But even if you do, you've got room to outplay with Doran Shield, your passive and your W, and it's not really, just like your jungler's not guaranteed to come top, theirs isn't either, so I'd say it's really recommended to play the lane in this way, and make the range matchup very, very hard for him to play, very volatile, and that's going to favor you a lot more than just staying, in the bush, giving CS and slowly bleeding out. Next up we have Palco, our NA Garen, playing up against a Camille, and even though he's a phase rush addict, he did take Conqueror. It is mandatory in this matchup, and I thought this would be a good one, because I know a lot of people struggle in this matchup. It is a very difficult one. So straight away we can see, this is a really good trade by him. He's not actually coming here for the trade. He's trying to bait Camille's passive out, and you can see he does just that, walking away, waiting out the passive, and then turns at just the right time. Auto E, I think he made a mistake, cancelled his auto, but it doesn't matter. He had the right idea, and Conqueror versus Grasp, you want to be taking that big trade level 1. So already off to a great start, especially Doran Shield vs Deep Blade. If you win a trade like that and you regen the damage back, really good for you. But Camille does get pushed in this matchup, so he has to be quite careful. And this is a big reason why I recommend the Camille players to take Conqueror. For that exact reason, you want to be favored in those big trades, but because Garen has Conqueror and Camille doesn't, she is not. He's not going to get pushed, so he has to let the wave come back in, and he's going to be waiting for his moment. So Garen can play this matchup a little bit better at 6, but your first major timer, apart from that level 1 trade, is going to be on the bounce back. Other than that, you need to be trying to conserve HP. So he's doing just that. He's still got his potion, by the way, and you'll see he's skilled W second, because Camille at level 3 will always go for that E trade and using the tower, the passive to block tower shot, which is why you want to be using W, so that you can avoid her being able to auto attack you. You'll see it very shortly, where he has a really good W here. He knows Camille's level 3, she's hugging the wall. We know exactly what she's going to do, and he's got his W ready. Boom, and you can see Camille can't get that Q2 onto him because of the tenacity from W. If she played it perfectly, there's a good chance she could get it down, but W is still better for that tenacity and blocking damage regardless. So we can see slow pushing this wave, last hitting it very slowly, and he wants to be trading later on in the lane. This is not really his time to strike. So now going for a Q, trying to bait out her passive there, but didn't want to take a Q, and he's just playing it very slow. So tries to space in between her W so that he didn't get hit by the outer part. So good try, but you can see here, just taking little trades, trying to regen a lot. He's still got his potion, by the way. He's popped it now, so it's not as bad as it looks at this timer. But the level 1 was the main point. It was really well played by him, and his time to strike is going to come later on. So pretty much if you're playing Camille, you want to force an advantage 1 to 5, but on Garen, if you can get level 6 without getting behind, your ulti has way more combat power than Camille, so you're going to be in a good spot if you can get to that point, level 6 while staying even. But we can see level 4, he's going to have more room to trade, so he's just trying to bait out Camille passive, we can see. He wants her to hit him once and bait out that passive so he can take a trade, and when she's near his tower trying to poke him, of course he will go for those quick Qs before she can hit him. But nothing to note here. Now the wave's coming back. Camille's trying to play for that kill, but he's regen a lot of the damage back, and she's running out on mana, and you can see spacing her towards the wave. So really nice there. Click towards her, click back, trying to bring her into the minion wave a little bit more. So really good movement by him, and he's able to get a good trade and bait her passive out. So really good stuff by him. When you play against Camille, straight up the main spell you need to play around is her passive. The other 3, you can block E with W. The other 2 don't matter too much. The passive is very, very important that you play around it and really start to get a good feel for that cooldown. But now just trying to regen, abuse Garen passive much as he can, and because Camille traded with him in the wave, it's now coming back towards him, and she's hitting it a little bit too much, so he's going to be able to catch this farm here. But he's going to wait. As soon as he got level 5, goes in straight away, goes for a trade while she's under tower, trying to get her passive out as well, and can extend the trade a little bit longer. You can see he's not afraid to keep trading big chunks of damage against her and regen it back, because he knows at level 6, that's his time to strike. Now, we did get ruined a little bit coming up. A little bit of a spoiler by the Jarvan. If you get every single piece of XP in top lane, or top lane only, on this up until this 5-minute normal wave, you get level 6. So here, his lane is actually in a great spot. He's got TP, he's got Flash Ignite, Camille's low HP, she is in lethal range from QE Ignite ulti. So he's in a good spot right now where he can play for a solo kill, but Jarvan ruins the time here. So you can see, really good trade by him. He's trying to get level 6, but because Jarvan came here and stole our XP, he's not 6. If he's level 6 right now, you know exactly what's happening. He's flashing and ulting this Camille. So solo kill, in my opinion, even though Jarvan came and ruined it, and holding onto his flash and his ignite, not his ignite, sorry, holding onto his flash because he doesn't want to waste it when Jarvan's here. But even though he didn't get that nice solo kill, we miss out on the dopamine. I'd say the way he played this 1 to 5 was quite good, especially the level 1 and the way he played around Camille's passive. And for our final matchup, we're going to be watching Stray play Garen into Nasus. So we've watched a hard range matchup, hard melee time for an easy melee matchup, and the way he plays this, even though he's got more of a scaling setup, phase conditioning, overgrowth, maximum scaling, he is still able to gain an advantage. So we can see here, he's playing relatively safe, playing more so for perfect farm, and he's still looking for an auto-Q auto-trade onto the Nasus, but his main priority in this lane, especially when he on Phase Rush Garen, is for CS, because you're not going to kill anyone level 1 to 2 on Phase Rush Garen unless they do something very terrible, so he's mainly focused on CS over trading during this point of the lane, because he doesn't want to miss CS just to poke the Nasus for a little bit of damage, and then Nasus heals it under tower anyway with his lifesteal. So I'll skip it a little bit, he's just farming, Nasus doesn't really give him room to trade until now. And we can see so far 12 out of 12 CS, really good start for him. And he does trade when Nasus walks up and disrespects him, but his main focus is on that farm. So pretty different approach to Galbu King, who mainly plays for the kill every time. But we can see here it is paying off for him in this lane where the Nasus was sitting very far back, very respectful, but now he's got perfect CS on the first 3 waves. Let's see if he can do it. And there, 19 out of 19, really good start for him. Now, generally, when you play these melee matchups that are favored for you and you get pushed, you let the wave come in and you try to kill them on the bounce back, right? But on Phase Rush Garen, if it's full HP Nasus, you're not killing anything. So if he lets the wave come back in, most likely, Nasus will just force the wave under tower, base and TP back, and then he's going to have an item advantage. So he wants to keep the wave here and make Nasus pressured to stay in lane. Of course, Nasus is also quite happy to stay in lane and extend it like this, but if you can get tier 2 boots on Garen first recall, really good for you. So he doesn't want to let the wave come back in, let Nasus get recall advantage, and then maybe he would have to base for boot stagger, you know, that recall we really hate. So he's mainly keeping the wave here so you can trade with him, but he doesn't want it to come all the way back to his side of the lane, especially level 4 Fiddlesticks with a Phase Rush Garen. They're probably not going to be able to gank him anyway, so you're trading here and really just prioritizing good CS. He has missed a couple from this point, but his CSing is still extremely good. Has his top priority, but he will trade at a time like this when he's not going to miss any, and the Nasus walks up to get farm of his own. So we can see he's watching his own wave closely, and when Nasus does go for farm, he's ready to punish it right here. If Nasus hits this minion, I'm going to Q spin him. So very, very good laning from him, and his farm is still very good at this point, even though he's been constantly trading. So we can see Nasus is starting to get lower and lower. We're getting some good trades out, and this next sequence was very impressive. I'll skip it a little bit. It's very similar. Nasus just sitting back farming with E, and here, this next wave, sorry, not this one here, right now. We talked about it in Palco's matchup, where the last minion on this 5-minute normal wave, if you haven't missed any XP, and your annoying jungler hasn't stolen any, is going to get you level 6. So he uses this timer very well. We'll see very shortly. His main focus up until this point was keeping really high CS while punishing Nasus when he went for his own farm, and it has paid off. Nasus is slightly above half HP, but still relatively chunked, and we can see right now on this trade, his wave's not even in under tower, and he doesn't hit the minion himself. He knows my spin will get me a level 6, and he's able to pick up a really nice solo kill under tower, and the wave is bouncing back towards him. So really good start. The wave might be in a bit of an awkward spot, but really good start from him. Great CS, 50 farm with a solo kill at this point. Really good start to the lane, even though he does have that full scaling setup. Next up, we're going to be covering the mid game, and we'll start with an example from Garen King. And as we can see, in this matchup, it's quite a hard ranged lane, so he did struggle a lot. He was down a lot of CS at the early point in this lane, but he did pick up a solo kill near the end, and now he's spiked on Stridebreaker. So we're going to be starting our mid game review from here, because this is when you want to be as proactive as possible once you've hit the spike. So we'll see exactly how he does so. So he didn't need to go top here. Aurora's covering for him, and he's going to be looking to make proactive plays. He noticed Kindred got a kill bot, and he's rotating to Dragon, so he hides on bush here, right? So there's a reason why the Garen hiding on bush is a meme, and that's just because it's very accurate. You don't really have any gap closes, so you need to utilize Fog of War quite well. And he leads his combo with Stridebreaker here into QE and follows the flash. So nice pick here, able to take down the Kindred, and he's going to keep going. Plays this next skirmish extremely well, so avoids the Taric E here. I see a lot of Garens rely on their Ws too much, but he relies on his movement mainly, and he's able to start to hit Taric. He doesn't have the damage to kill him without ulti, so you can see he's still got his W, still holding W. A lot of Garens make that mistake when they're comboing, they just use their W just for fun, or just during the combo, or reacting to a CC, but he prefers to dodge and holds on to that spell. Even here, he could have used it on the Jin W, but he doesn't want to waste it. He's holding on to it, and Taric's space is wrong, so he's able to pick up this kill, stride break out of there. So really nice skirmishing from him. And even now, pops his W to absorb this burst, and he's able to space this out, dodge the next gen W. So really good movement, really good mechanics, but a good foresight to predict that Kindred was going to do Dragon, and he rotated here. And something that's interesting from this point is you'd assume that he would base on this point, but he greeds a little bit here for this wave, and he's just relying mainly on his passive. So you don't need to base on Garen that badly unless you have an item, and he doesn't have enough for full item, so he's looking to get hide on bush. Kindred is Herald is spawning soon. What are they going to play for? Of course they're going to be playing for this Herald, and his jungler helps him out, able to get another pick. So he's really just in this Kindred's head the whole game, and now especially he's got red buff, some extra regen. He doesn't need to really base. Great Ashe ulti, so he punishes, and just like that, he went from being down 30-40 CS in his lane to being 6-1 in a matter of minutes, just from his mid-game decision making, anticipating where the enemy's going to be and what their rotations are going to be, and hiding in a bush so that he could punish that. Now, on this deploy, his job is a lot easier. He's got another mini spike, berserks and zeal, and normally you don't really want to be going straight mid as Garen, but nobody's answering this urgent cannon wave, so he feels like he has to, which was good, and punishes Tara going for vision. So a little bit of a freebie there, nothing really notable, and then straight back to side, trying to use this herald with his jungler. So he's going to write it down, and something I liked here is the punish on the Hui, where Hui threw out the fear onto Herald, trying to kill it, mistake, and because Garmin King's probably one of the only top laners that knows what Hui does, he punishes his fear being on cooldown, and he's able to pick up yet another kill. So pushing the pace of this game really hard, tries to join the skirmish, and even punishes his Jhin as well, if I remember correctly. So, one might argue just breaking tier 2 is more valuable than killing this Jhin, but maybe he's doing it for the mental edge, or he's just a kill-hungry guy. Either way, it's fine. But something I like from the sequence, instantly recall. When you play top lane, especially a fast-paced side laning champion like Garen, when you need a base, you want a base as soon as possible. And even though Garen doesn't technically need a base, he's going to just regen HP and he has no mana, he's got PD. So he knows he wants to recall, so he does it as fast as he can, straight back onto bottom, really fast-paced gameplay. That's what I like to see. So hovers around bot, notices Aurora is covering that lane instead, so rotates back up here. And now he's going to be looking to punish Hui if he mispositions inside, but he knows he's weak-sided right now. His team's a little bit down in tempo, so he's choosing the Simon to be a bit respectful, but he wants to be following up what the Rail wants to do. So he's able to get another pick onto Kindred. So really fast-paced gameplay onto Hui as well. They're just kind of spoon-feeding him at this point, so I'll call the review here. But the most impressive part of this game, I would say, was him being able to anticipate exactly what the opponents would do, especially around these neutral objectives, and position himself in advance in the position where he can punish them from walking in, trying to get vision, and trying to get that objective. And for our final mid-game, we have Stray, and this one's mainly focused around his team fighting and his skirmishing, which he did extremely well in this game. And if you're wondering the game state, right now he's 3-2, stride and a half, and it's relatively even. He got a little bit of a lead against Smolder, but he's not extremely fed by any means. But his team fighting and skirmishing was very good in this game. So pushes in top, trying to create some pressure, wants to be fighting around this Herald, and goes on to Nidalee for a little chunk, holds on to his phase rush, doesn't want to proc it just yet, or his stride, holds on to it for hit. And he procs it onto the Swain and then kites back. Playing around your cooldowns is really important, especially on Phase Rush Garen. It's a lot harder to just run them over without Conqueror, and he's just kiting back, trying to weave in and out with his abilities. So the Neferi overcommits, he's able to get the kill here, not too shabby. And again, waiting off his spells, playing around his cooldowns of not just his spells, but his phase rush as well. And he's able to flash in and take down this Nidalee, uses his W quite well on the Swain E. So really good team fighting overall. You notice he held on to his his W, for a very long time, which is a pretty big difference, I'd say, from the vast majority of Garen players out there, and the high rank ones is that W usage. It can be very tempting to use it in battle, but you need to be using it for a specific purpose. So he pops it here to block the Neferi burst, and then kites back. He's being a little bit greedy here because he wants his item. He was able to farm up enough for PD, so now he's going to be very, very spiked in this game. So he heads straight top, wants to create a bit of pressure before he rotates down, and I'm pretty sure he got ganked here, but he's able to play the skirmish quite nicely. So he was initially wanting to go mid, but he felt some warning tingles, so instead he wanted to, maybe not warning tingles, he wanted to kill the Neferi, but he got ganked, but he's able to outplay this one as well. So spins down the Swain, able to kill him with ulti and kite back, and weaving in and out. So playing around his spells, trying to bait the Neferi in for more. And he's trying to pick up another kill, but Nidalee came as well. So he's able to pop onto the Neferi, kites back, uses Stride Breaker very well. So you can see he's very, very good at kiting and playing around his cooldowns, able to pick up another kill before going down. But the amount of pressure he created was definitely worth the death, and he even picked up a lot of kills as well. So here we can see a lot of Garens would default into going straight top. But he knows Dragon's up in 30, and it's third Dragon for him. He really wants to be a part of that fight. So he leaves this wave under tower, sadly. I guess there's not that many creeps anyway. And he rotates mid, and I was really impressed with his team fighting in this fight. So I'm going to be putting on to his vision. So helping his team get push straight away, helping them get some control. Tries to get a Stride Breaker down, actually trying to start the fight out. And he's building his tank build now. Did meant as his third item, even though he is fit enough. He could have gone IE if he wanted, but he does default to that tank build a lot more often. So yeah, he's helping his team get control, really staunching this area for his team. But the way he played this team fight was very nice. So Leona goes in first, good on her. Playing a little bit of a front to back. His team's not really ready to follow up if he goes super deep. So just starts on the Swain, but keeps running down, and now he's cutting back out. Uses all of his spells, uses phase rush, waiting for that next set of cooldowns before he goes back in, and it's going to be up very shortly. And now his Q's back up, his E's back up, so he can go back in, kiting in and out, and now he's really low HP, but he wants to be pressuring. He wants to bait them in so that he can get some more kills here, so we can see it. He's clicking towards them with the intention to bait them in. Stride breaker with Q, very intimidating, very likely somebody will go in on that, but he knows he's got his W up very shortly. Kites back, gets his W up just in time, silences Nefuri, so really good at baiting the opponent into an unfavorable position and give use of his abilities as well. And straight back to bot, no time wasted. As soon as that fight is done, very consistent to Galbu King as well. You don't want to waste any time on this champion, and just regening with red buff and his passive, so didn't need a base by any means, even though he was low HP. And he makes a mistake and dies here, right? He's still human, he's going to make some mistakes inside, but I was really impressed with his team fighting and skirmishing in this game across every single objective that he fought. Alright everyone, that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you still want to be studying up on your Garen a bit more, I'm going to be posting the opgg and a couple of YouTube links of some of the players that we watched today, so that can be a great resource to use. But as usual, if you have any video ideas at all, or want to see me cover a different champion, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.